Hi guys, Jamie here from JB Mocean. Today we're going to be looking at how we can go about creating something like this. We're going to be using the Attractor in Cinema 4D to draw our spheres in, and then we're going to be exploding them out. We're also going to be looking at how we can slow down time to create a really cool slow motion effect. Stay tuned, here we go. So, first off, we're going to create a sphere. And this is the sphere that we're going to be emitting from our emitter. Let's bring the radius down to about 15. And we can go ahead and create our emitter. So, simulate particles emitter. That's where it lives, and we can make the sphere a child of the emitter object. Click on the emitter object and then click on show objects so that we'll be able to see our spheres being emitted. If we turn that off, you'll get these white lines. So we want to be able to see our objects. So click show objects and click play there. Okay, so that's going to emit out our objects. Let's turn up the speed to about 350 and the variation set to 10%. I want to reduce the size of the sphere, so click on the sphere object. I'm just going to increase this so we can see that. Click the sphere object, go to your scale tool and just bring the scale down there a little. And I want to add some variation to the scale. So in the emitter object under the particle tab, go to your end scale and set this to 100%. So now we get some nice variation in the size of our sphere. Maybe a bit less, say 80% on that. Cool. Okay. So what we want to do next is we want to increase the so we want to basically set the stop emission here to about 300 frames, and we're going to increase our frame range to 300 also. Double click in the center to expand that out, and I want to move the emitter back here along the Z axis to about there. And next we're going to create a sphere, another sphere, and this is what our emitted spheres are going to be attracted to. So let's make that sphere just a little bit bigger. I'm just undoing that. I'm going to set it to a radius of about 120. Maybe even 130. Okay. Now, to tell our emitted spheres to be attracted to this sphere, we're going to create an attractor. We're going to add an attractor object. So under simulate, go down to particles and select the attractor object. Now our spheres are going to be attracted to this attractor object. As you can see, I'm going to rotate this emitter so that our spheres are going to be emitted at an angle, but they're still going to be drawn towards our attractor object. So let me just turn off this sphere, and I want to increase the strength to about 25,000. Okay, so now you can see that our attractor object is actually attracting the spheres that we're emitting out there. So we want to turn back on our sphere, and we are going to add a simulation tag to this. This is going to be a collider body. So now once we add our rigid body to our emitted spheres, those are going to stick. They're going to basically not be able to pass through this sphere. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Right click on our emitted spheres, go down to simulation tag and add a rigid body tag. Now you can see that the spheres are actually unable to pass through our center sphere here. I'm going to call this center sphere. And I'm going to increase the strength of the attractor here so that this actually pulls our spheres into the center here. So I'm going to increase the strength there to 35,000. Okay. And I'm going to increase the size of the center sphere to about 135. Okay, so now let's see what we got. So what I want to do is increase the linear damping of our emitted sphere. So in the rigid body tag, go to our force tab and set the linear damping to 60%. And now you can see that we're getting a lot less stray spheres flying all over the place. I'll just show you that at 0%. And as you can see, they're flying kind of up and all over the place. Turn up the linear damping then again to 60%, and that eradicates that problem. Okay, cool. So I want to increase the amount of spheres that are emitted. So go to the birth rate and turn that up to 30 for the birth rate editor, and do the same for birth rate renderer. Again, if you want to see what these are doing, right click, go down to show help, and you'll be able to read exactly what those are doing. Okay, so now we're getting a lot more spheres coming in. That's looking pretty cool. Now, I want to duplicate the emitter. So I'm just going to pause this, select my emitter, and I'm going to go here to my move tool. And I'm just going to use this green move tool here. Basically, if you use this one here, it's going to move the object, the selected object, along all axes except for the green one, and the green one is the Y one. So hold down Control, and then we can move that along the X and Z axes. I'm going to go over here with that, and I'm going to press R on my keyboard, and I'm going to rotate that around so it's facing our sphere, and I'm going to move it to about here. I'm going to rotate it again a little bit, so it's just kind of, they're going to be emitted in the direction just slightly right of the sphere. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, I'm liking that. And now I'm going to do the same. I'm just going to duplicate this sphere, go to my move tool, just going to move around here, and I'm going to select this emitter, hold down Control, and I'm going to duplicate this so it's about here. So we got a nice kind of triad going on here with our emitters. R on your keyboard and rotate that around so that it's facing the sphere. Doesn't have to be facing directly on it, could be pointing just slightly right of the sphere there. The attractor is going to do the work for us there. Okay. So now we have a lot of spheres that are all different sizes that are being attracted to our attractor. I'm just going to move that up to the top of our object manager, and I'm going to move the center sphere up to the top just for my own personal preference, so everything's a bit more organized. And so that's looking pretty good. Our emitters are emitting the spheres, and our attractor is dragging the spheres into the center, and our center sphere, which has a collider tag, is preventing our rigid body spheres from basically passing through the center sphere's geometry there. Okay, so next we're going to make this center sphere invisible. So to do that, hover over your two little circles here, hold down Alt and click twice to make that invisible. Let's hit play there and see what it looks like. Cool. Okay. So next we want to create a material that we're going to add on to our emitted spheres. So double click here in your materials pane here and double click the new material to open it up. I'm going to go to the color channel and I'm going to change this to a nice greenish blue, and I'm going to add that to all three of my emitted spheres there. Now I'm holding down Control and dragging to duplicate those material tags. Now I want to turn on my interactive render region and crank up the quality there so we can see what we got. So I'm going to go to in the reflections channel, I'm going to crank up the specular strength, maybe down a little bit more, and I'm going to reduce the width so that we get some nice crispy specular highlights on our spheres. So I'm going to set the width, keep the width at 28% there. And next I am going to we're going to set up some lights for our scene. So I'll just turn off the interactive render region, and I'm going to add a camera at this stage so that we can come back to this. I like this view and I can jump back to this at any stage. So make that active. I'm going to set or add a protection tag so I'm unable then to move it, and now I'm going to deactivate that camera so I can move around the scene. So now for our lighting, I'm going to set up a 3-point lighting right now. So select your light object and move this forward along the x-axis and move it over to the left along the z-axis. Move it up slightly along the y-axis. Now this, you don't have to put it in the exact position that I have it. This is kind of trial and error. What you can do is you can open up your interactive render viewer to to see what that's looking like. So I want to select the light and go into the coordinates tab, bring it up a little further along the y-axis. And I want to turn on shadows. Go to the shadow tab. I'm going to turn on area shadows. I'm going to set the density of that to about 85%. And that's looking pretty good. Next, so that will be my key. That will act as my key light. Next, I want to duplicate this light. So I'm going to go into my top view. I'm going to hold down Control and I'm going to duplicate that light and drag it over to about there. Maybe move it back here along the X and a little bit further along the Z axis. Now for this light, I want to turn off shadows and I want to turn the intensity down to about 50%. Maybe have it at about 55. Okay, cool. And let's turn on ambient occlusion because it always makes everything look better. It's going to add contact shadows to our scene. So go to Effect here in your render settings and turn on ambient occlusion there and look at the difference that makes straight away. You gotta love ambient occlusion. Okay, so this is going to be our fill, and we're going to have one more light. So go back in middle mouse click, bring up your 4-way view, and then back into your top view, middle mouse click over your top view there to open that up. So we're going to use this little green thingy again. So again, this is going to move any selected object along all axes except for the green one. And the green one is, of course, the y-axis. So hold down Control and then click and drag. And that's going to go back behind our sphere of spheres. And we're going to call this rim. And let's jump back into our perspective view there. And I want to bring the rim up along the y-axis until I feel like it's making a difference to our scene. So I'm bringing it down now, and I just want to bring it up to about there. As you can see, it's basically just separating our balls from the background there. So if I turn that off and turn it back on, it's just adding more specular highlights also to our spheres. Cool. Okay, so next we are going to add a bit more color to this. So I want to hold down Control and drag this material, and I am going to open that up, and I'm going to just change the color to, I don't know, a reddish color. And I'm going to duplicate this sphere by holding down Control and dragging. So now this emitter is going to be emitting 2 different kinds of spheres, a green one and now a red one. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to duplicate this sphere down here into our second emitter, and I'm going to do the same for our third emitter. So now each of our 3 emitters are going to be emitting 2 kinds of spheres, a greenish blue one and a red one. So I want to duplicate this material again, and I'm going to change this to be yellow. And I'm going to do the exact same thing again. I'm going to duplicate this sphere so that our first emitter, well, our emitter dot 2 is going to be emitting 3 different types of spheres, a green one, a red one, and now a yellow one. And I'm going to duplicate this down to our emitter dot 1, and I'm going to do the same for our emitter. So now each emitter is emitting 3 spheres, and each sphere has a different color that we've created down here. So now this is looking really nice. So it's slowing down there a bit. I'm getting a bit nervous in case Cinema 4D crashes. So I'm just going to save my work. Do a file save as. I'm going to go to this folder here. I'm going to call it particle emitter scene. Okay. So let's continue on playing this out. So at about, let's say, where do we want this to explode? We want this to explode at around frame 160. So I'll pause it there. I'm going to go to the next frame twice. So about frame 160. Maybe even further. We'll go further. We'll go to about frame 190. And this is where I want our balls, basically, or our collection of spheres to explode. So to do that, go to your Attractor object, go to the Object tab, and add a keyframe, a strength keyframe. Go to the next frame, and we can set this to minus 20,000. Hit enter, and add another keyframe. So let's see what that does. So it's going to get to our keyframes here, and then it's going to go, and everything's going to explode. And as you can see, our emitter here is still emitting spheres, so we don't want it to keep emitting spheres once it's exploded. So as you can see, our two keyframes are here. At frame 190, that's when we want all of our emitters to stop emitting, basically. So hold down Control and then select each one of them. Go to Stop Emission and set that to frame 190. So once our balls basically explode, the emitters are going to stop emitting. So let's see what that looks like one more time. I'm just going to pause it here so we can get an idea of how this is going to be rendering out. So I just want to deselect our objects so that we don't have any move tool visible there. Okay, continue on there. Maybe I'll pause it here also. Continue on. And boom. Okay, so that's looking pretty cool. So what I want to do is just turn off my interactive render region for now. And what I want to do at frame, so I'm just going to open up our dope sheet here, Shift F3 on your keyboard. So our balls explode at around frame 190. So at about frame 180, I want to slow down the time. And that's when I'm going to rotate the camera around for the dramatic slow motion explosion. So at about frame 180, we want to press Control D on your keyboard to bring up the project settings. Go to your Dynamics tab and go to General. And for time scale, set a keyframe. Go forward one keyframe and reduce the time scale to 10% and add another keyframe. Now let's see what that looks like. So it's coming in, it's at 100% time scale. Once it gets to frame 180, time scale is going to drop down to 10%. Boom, slow motion. Just before the explosion. So when the time slows down, we also want the camera to start rotating around our object. So let's bring this back to 180 and we are going to go to our camera. Now we want our camera to rotate around the center of our object, and our object is in the world center. So to do that, let's create a null and let's make our camera a child of that null. So that now if we select the null and go to coordinates and rotate, our camera is going to rotate around the center of our object. See that? Let me just zoom out a bit more so you can see that better. Now that if we select our null and rotate that, our camera is going to rotate around the center there of our null. So basically our null is rotating as to is our camera because it's a child of it. So make this camera active again and we are going to just play this out. Just going to open up my dope sheet there with Shift F3 and I'm going to pause it. Let me just make this smaller so we can see what's going on. Hold down Alt and use your right click to zoom in on your dope sheet. So hit play again and pause it there. So I want our camera to start rotating just when our time slows down. So I'm gonna set a keyframe, not here, because our time doesn't start slowing down until here. I'm I'm going to set a keyframe at frame 181 on our null on this H rotation. Add your keyframe and hit play. And let's see, we're going to go to about frame 260 and we are going to rotate our camera around like this, and then add another keyframe. And at this stage I want the time scale to go back to 100%. So I'm going to just increase the frame range because it doesn't look like we're going to have enough. Double click to expand that out. And now use Control D to open up your project settings. In the Dynamics tab under the General tab, add a timescale keyframe. Go forward 1 frame and then bring this back up to 100% and add another keyframe there. So let's see what this looks like now. So it's coming in at a 100% time scale. Once it gets to about frame 180, time is going to slow down. Boom. Camera's going to rotate around as our balls are all exploding, and 260, the time is going to go back to 100, and that's going to be that. Okay guys, so that concludes this tutorial. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned a lot, and I will see you in the next video.